Detective Malik Johnson, a respected police officer known for his integrity and sharp sense of justice, boards a plane for a crucial mission. This flight is vital, as he must reach another city where a complex case awaits him. The case requires swift action to gather essential evidence and question a key witness. Dressed in a sharp suit and a dark, elegant coat, Malik attracts attention, but he walks with confidence, undeterred by the admiring or inquisitive gazes of the other passengers. As he walks down the aisle, his ticket in hand, Malik searches for his seat with the calm assurance of a man accustomed to high-pressure situations. When he finally reaches the row indicated, he is surprised to find a middle-aged man, a well-dressed executive with a condescending air, already seated in his spot. The man, engrossed in a financial magazine, barely looks up when Malik stops beside him. "Excuse me, sir, but I believe you're sitting in my seat," Malik says politely but firmly. The man dismisses the remark with a wave of his hand, nonchalantly assuring Malik that the seat belongs to him and that he has no intention of moving. Malik calmly shows him his ticket, but the man barely glances at it before shrugging and sinking deeper into his seat as if to stake his claim. The tension is palpable. Malik, with his experience in handling tense situations, remains composed, though his gaze sharpens. Nearby passengers begin to take notice, whispering among themselves, intrigued by the silent confrontation. The flight attendant, an elegant and professional woman, steps forward confidently to intervene. Her smile is courteous, almost indulgent, as if she is trying to downplay the situation. After briefly listening to both sides, she turns to the man already seated and, in a friendly tone, asks if he really wants to stay in that seat. The man, encouraged by the lack of firmness in her voice, nods confidently, signaling that he has no intention of moving. Malik, feeling a slight frustration building within him, presents his ticket once again to the flight attendant. He expects her to enforce the rules. However, to his surprise, she responds politely but firmly, suggesting he find another seat, perhaps at the back of the plane. The implication of her words is clear. She prefers to avoid a conflict by moving Malik, even if it means ignoring what is right. A heavy silence settles. Some passengers, witnesses to the exchange confused glances, some furrowing their brows in disbelief, others clearly uncomfortable with this blatant injustice. Malik, still calm but internally exasperated by the clear bias, feels the pressure building inside him. The takeoff is imminent, and the plane begins to buzz with safety announcements and last-minute preparations. The flight attendant, for her part, seems determined to wrap up the situation quickly, her smooth and unflappable smile still in place. Struggling to maintain his composure, Malik takes a deep breath. He knows this is not the time for conflict, but he refuses to back down. He looks around, hoping for silent support from the passengers, but meets only averted gazes, as people seem eager to avoid the discomfort of the scene. Seeing that Malik is not easily swayed, the flight attendant leans slightly toward him and speaks in a low but determined voice. "Mr. Johnson, I understand you're frustrated, but we need to prepare for takeoff now. If you don't find a seat quickly, we will have to ask you to leave the plane." She looks at him with a neutral expression, but her gaze betrays a hint of impatience. Malik, however, remains impassive, though the frustration stirs inside him. He weighs his options, but the pressure of the moment forces him to make a swift decision. In silence, he casts one last glance at the man, who, with a smug smile, settles even more comfortably into his seat, eyes fixed straight ahead as if to declare his victory. The magnitude of the injustice, the flight attendant's bias, and the man's condescension affect Malik more than he anticipated. As a detective known for his integrity and commitment to the law, he now finds himself reduced to a mere formality to be disregarded. Once again, he must choose between his honor and the urgency of his mission. Despite the irritation rising in his throat, Malik takes a deep breath and decides not to let his emotions control him. "Very well," he finally responds, his voice icy, contrasting with his forced smile. "I'll find another seat." His calm tone betrays a firmness that causes the flight attendant to lower her gaze briefly, as though realizing the tension her lack of support has caused. Malik then slowly turns, making his way down the aisle in search of an empty seat, under the silent gaze of the passengers. As Malik moves toward the back of the plane, He hears a firm voice that halts him in his tracks. A young woman, elegant and determined, has stood up and is walking toward the front of the aircraft. All eyes turn to her as she addresses the flight attendant with confidence. "Excuse me, but I need to intervene," she begins, her voice resonating throughout the cabin. "What I've just witnessed is unacceptable. I've faced this kind of treatment in many situations, and it's time for it to stop." Her piercing gaze never leaves the flight attendant, who stands frozen, slightly disoriented. The young woman continues, her voice tinged with controlled indignation. "This man's skin color has nothing to do with the situation, and racial prejudice has no place here. We are all passengers on this flight, and each of us deserves respect." The young woman's words, spoken with vibrant sincerity, echo in the cabin. The flight attendant, caught off guard, tries to respond, justifying her actions, but the young woman doesn't give her a chance to backpedal. "You're being influenced by a condescending look," she continues, her gaze hard and assured. "This behavior is unacceptable. The rules on board must be respected, yes, but not at the expense of passengers' dignity. Giving in to prejudice is the worst thing, especially in an environment where fairness should prevail. This isn't the first time I've witnessed such injustice, and I refuse to stay silent in the face of such discrimination." A murmur sweeps through the cabin. Several passengers, who had been watching the scene in silence, begin to whisper among themselves, clearly in agreement with the young woman's words. Approving glances are cast her way, while some nod, moved by her courage. A middle-aged man, seated a few rows away, adds loudly, "She's right. This man deserves to sit in his rightful place." As the atmosphere on the plane grows increasingly tense, the young woman, determined to see things through, makes a radical decision. Turning to the flight attendant, she wears a face of determination and, in a firm and confident voice, declares, "I'm leaving the plane. This treatment is unacceptable, and I intend to file a complaint. I cannot stay here without acting in the face of this injustice." The passengers around her, who had been absorbed in their own concerns, begin to pay attention to the scene, intrigued by the young woman's courage. The flight attendant, visibly uncomfortable, tries to reason with her in a soft voice. "Madam, I understand your frustration, but this might complicate the departure of the flight. Perhaps you could discuss this with our supervisor after takeoff." But the young woman shakes her head, firm and determined, her piercing gaze reinforcing her stance. "No, I'd rather not wait. If this flight takes off without this situation being resolved, I will file a formal complaint against the airline, and I will contact the relevant authorities. I assure you, this won't end here." With calm but resolve, she collects her belongings and heads toward the exit of the plane. Her movements are followed by the gazes of the passengers, some visibly impressed, others whispering to each other, fascinated by the scene unfolding before them. At the back of the plane, Malik, who had been quietly observing the exchange, is touched by the bravery of this woman. As she passes by him, he offers a grateful smile, a slight nod as a silent gesture of support. The flight attendant, realizing that no attempt at persuasion will change the young woman's decision, finally agrees with a sigh. "Very well, I'll help you exit," she says, resigned. "I will also inform our supervisor of your departure." The young woman exits the plane, her gaze determined and her heart filled with newfound energy. Outside, without hesitation, she heads directly to the airline counter, determined to make her voice heard. Upon reaching the desk, she requests to speak with a supervisor and details every aspect of the incident that occurred on board. She describes the unacceptable behavior she faced, her disappointment with the crew's handling of the situation, and her conviction that such treatment cannot be tolerated. She carefully provides her personal information and those of the witnesses present, ensuring her complaint will be taken seriously and addressed without delay. Meanwhile, on board the plane, Malik, now seated, tries to calm the swirling thoughts in his mind. Though the flight is about to take off, he remains unsettled by the events he just witnessed. Yet, he feels a deep sense of relief, mixed with genuine admiration for the stranger who stood up so courageously against an unjust situation. The young woman's determination did not go unnoticed by Malik. Her bravery and tenacity resonate with him, evoking a sense of solidarity he hasn't felt in a long time. Her act, though seemingly simple, gives him a glimmer of hope. In a world where people often stay silent to avoid trouble, this woman reminded everyone that justice and dignity are worth fighting for, even in the most ordinary of circumstances. Inspired by her gesture, Malik takes a deep breath, aware that this flight will mark a turning point in how he perceives the injustices he may face in the future. The plane finally takes off with a slight delay, the engine roaring in a reassuring growl. Malik, now comfortably settled, immerses himself in his thoughts while reviewing the files related to his mission. Each page he turns seems heavy on his shoulders, but he can't help but reflect on the determination of the young woman who had defied injustice only moments before. He understands that the road to justice and equality is often fraught with obstacles, but actions like hers remind him that every effort matters, no matter the size or context. Every step toward the truth is a victory in itself, and he feels a growing wave of hope. The young woman's voice still echoes in his mind, urging him to reflect on his own battles and how he can make a difference. In this plane, surrounded by strangers, he suddenly feels connected to this shared struggle for fairness, a struggle he now wants to fully embrace. After landing, as the plane taxis to the gate, Malik notices a group of airport security police heading toward the plane door with some urgency. A shiver of anticipation runs through his body. He quickly understands that they are there in response to the complaint filed by the young woman. His thoughts race as he wonders what will happen next. Malik glances furtively around him, scanning the faces of the other passengers, some appearing anxious, others curious. The atmosphere on board is thick with palpable tension, a kind of tacit consensus on the importance of the moment. He feels a growing responsibility on his shoulders, an obligation not to remain silent in the face of this situation. As the security officers approach, Malik slowly stands, his decision solidifying in his mind. He knows he cannot remain passive as an observer. He follows the movement of the officers, determined to bear witness to the young woman's bravery and to support her call for justice. What he had expected to be a simple business flight has now become a pivotal moment in his life, an opportunity to raise his voice and fight for what is right. A security officer, who has taken Malik in charge, introduces him with clear respect to the other members of the group. "This is Mr. Malik Johnson. We've received complaints about an incident on the flight and would like to ensure everything is in order," he announces in a clear yet grave voice. The airline representative, a man of imposing stature with a serious expression, turns toward Malik. His eyes are fixed on him with particular attention, as if weighing every word spoken. "Mr. Johnson, we've been informed of the circumstances surrounding your incident on board. We've also received the detailed complaint from the young woman. We take these accusations very seriously and wish to ensure that we understand every aspect of the situation. Can you provide us with your account of the events?" Malik, feeling the weight of the moment, takes a deep breath to collect his thoughts. With calmness and clarity, he begins to explain what happened. "At the beginning of the flight, I settled into my seat in business class," he begins, his voice firm but composed. "Soon after, a white man approached me, demanding that I leave my seat. He seemed disturbed by my presence, as if my right to be there wasn't valid." He sees the expressions of the officers change, a glimmer of understanding mixed with concern crossing their faces. Malik continues, detailing each interaction. "I tried to stay calm and engage with him politely, but he persisted, almost shouting. The flight attendant intervened, but instead of trying to calm the situation, she sided with the man, ignoring my explanations. I felt humiliated, as though my dignity had no value. In the end, I had to find another seat to avoid escalating the tension." As he speaks, he emphasizes that he never intended to create tension. He wants the officers to understand that he was subjected to biased treatment, clearly exposing racial prejudices. It wasn't just about the seat, it was about respect. This treatment isn't isolated. It reflects attitudes that many people, like myself, face every day. I can't remain silent in the face of this injustice, he concludes, his voice trembling with emotion. Malik watches closely the reactions of the group members. He hopes they don't see just an isolated incident but realize the broader systemic issues that continue to persist in society. The airline representative, his expression now more empathetic, takes note of every word, visibly moved by Malik's account. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Johnson. Your testimony is invaluable to us, and we will review it carefully." At this moment, Malik feels a mixture of hope and relief. He knows he has done what he had to do. His courage has not only opened the way for a necessary dialogue but has also laid the groundwork for potential change, both for him and for those who will come after. The lead officer turns to Malik after consulting the information on his tablet. "We've also spoken with the young woman who filed the complaint. She provided a detailed description of the incident and expressed similar concerns about the treatment of passengers based on their skin color." Malik nods, aware that every voice matters in this fight for justice. The gravity of the situation begins to take shape, and he realizes that it's not just his personal experience at stake, but also a much larger societal issue. Due to the immense pressure exerted by the complaint and the intervention of the young woman, the airline decides to summon the flight attendant involved to get her own account of the events. A meeting is arranged, gathering the airline representatives, security personnel, and an external mediator to ensure an impartial investigation. Malik, both anxious and determined, knows this meeting could have significant implications. The flight attendant, Claire Dubois, enters the meeting room, visibly tense. Her face is marked by worry, and she avoids making eye contact with the other participants. She is greeted by an airline representative, a human resources manager, and an external investigator tasked with overseeing the situation. The atmosphere is thick with tension, everyone aware of the gravity of the allegations. The airline representative begins the interrogation, his voice firm but measured. "Ms. Dubois, we have received several complaints regarding your behavior on yesterday's flight. We would like to understand your version of the events. Can you explain why you supported the white man in the dispute with Mr. Malik Johnson?" Claire takes a deep breath, her heart racing, and begins to explain. "I listened to both parties, and initially, I believed the white man was right because of his confident demeanor and insistence that he was in his seat. I recognize now that I should have checked the tickets more carefully. I didn't want the situation to escalate, so I thought moving Mr. Johnson might be a quick solution to avoid further tension." The human resources manager intervenes, his voice firm but measured. "Why did you suggest that Mr. Johnson move, when he had a valid ticket for the seat in question?" Claire hesitates before answering, a shadow of doubt crossing her face. "I didn't want the flight to be delayed any further, and I thought Mr. Johnson could just find another seat. Also, I hadn't anticipated the impact of my decision. I didn't think it would go this far." The external investigator, with some firmness, looks at her. "Did you notice any signs that could indicate the situation was influenced by racial bias?" Claire freezes for a moment, her mind racing with thoughts about what she could have done differently. "I have to admit, now that I think about it, unconscious biases might have played a role. I allowed the white man to stay in his seat, even though it was clear that Mr. Johnson had a valid ticket. I sincerely regret that." The airline representative continues, arms crossed, his gaze scrutinizing Claire. "We have also received testimonies indicating that you suggested Mr. Johnson should accept a less comfortable seat or even step aside. Can you explain that?" Claire, her face tense, defends herself. "I simply thought it was a way to resolve the conflict quickly, but I now understand that it was perceived as an injustice. I didn't mean to show favoritism, but I should have handled the situation differently. I should have been more attentive to everyone's feelings and the context." After an hour of testimony and questioning, the airline committee retreats to deliberate. The discussions are intense, as they must weigh the various aspects of the issue, including the impact on the company's image and the racial discrimination concerns. Their exchange reflects deep concern for the company's reputation, but also a genuine desire to understand and correct the injustices. In the deliberation room, the committee members exchange various points of view. Some believe the company should take disciplinary action against Claire, while others advocate for an educational approach, aiming to raise awareness among staff about racial discrimination issues and the importance of diversity. One member proposes the idea of organizing unconscious bias training workshops, convinced that this could help prevent future incidents. Others emphasize that the situation reveals a broader systemic issue. This isn't just an issue of individual behavior. It's an opportunity for us to reflect on our practices and culture within the company, says one member. We must take concrete steps to ensure all of our passengers feel respected and safe. The committee finally meets to announce its decision. Claire Dubois is called in again, her heart racing. The airline representative, in a solemn tone, states, "Ms. Dubois, after reviewing the evidence and hearing from all parties involved, we have decided to revoke your position. Your handling of the situation was inappropriate and disrespectful to Mr. Malik Johnson. We cannot tolerate behavior that does not reflect the values of our company." Claire, although devastated, accepts the decision with dignity. She straightens her shoulders and says, "I understand. I am sorry for what happened and for the harm I may have caused. I recognize my mistakes, and I will do everything to learn from this experience." Her words are filled with regret, but also with a desire for self-improvement. She leaves the room with her head held high, determined to rebuild herself. The impact of this decision is significant. The media reports the incident, highlighting the challenges of racial bias in customer service. The airline issues a statement reaffirming its commitment to diversity and inclusion, promising to strengthen its staff training to avoid such incidents in the future. The coverage not only emphasizes Malik's case but also the importance of listening to the voices of minority passengers, revealing a larger movement for social justice. Malik Johnson continues his mission with a sense of mixed satisfaction. He is glad that justice has been served, but remains aware that the fight against prejudice is far from over. His mind is occupied with thoughts about how incidents like this expose deep fractures in society. He wonders what the long-term impact of this situation will be on the airline's staff and on other passengers in similar circumstances. As for the young woman, she is hailed as a civil rights advocate, and her actions inspire others not to stay silent in the face of injustice. She receives messages of support from many people, who see her as a heroine for taking a stand. Her experience motivates her to get more involved in community initiatives, organizing workshops to raise awareness about racial biases and the importance of defending others' rights. The airline, on its part, implements new initiatives to raise awareness among its staff about unconscious biases and improve passenger treatment. They launch a mandatory training program that includes modules on diversity and inclusion, testimonies from passengers who have experienced discrimination, and discussions on how to handle conflicts empathetically and respectfully. Employees are encouraged to share their experiences and reflect on ways to improve service. The company's leadership also aims to collaborate with civil rights organizations to ensure their training program is relevant and effective. They hope these measures will transform the company culture, creating an environment where every passenger feels respected and valued, regardless of their skin color. As Malik and the young woman continue their fight for justice, they realize it is a collective struggle. Everyone has a role to play in promoting positive change, and their commitment inspires others to do the same. The fight against prejudice thus becomes a shared journey, where the voices of those who have been marginalized are finally heard, turning isolated incidents into catalysts for societal change.